Foster, who is CEO at Crucial Compliance. Paul will tell us more about how safer gambling and responsible gambling compliance can ultimately be a net money maker for operators. I think that this is something that we are all very interested in. Paul, welcome, and please come to the stage.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Paul.
That's great.
Welcome.
Thank you. Okay, so slightly contentious, but what I'm going to talk about today is that actually, if you get your player protection journeys right, in whichever market in the world, you will actually get a positive return overhaul on your business. So instead of compliance costing you money, you can actually have a commercial advantage if you implement it right. And that has been seen by all the major operators, from the ARC program that we've already heard a lot about today, to what Flutter have done, to what MGM have done. The key thing here is the bigger operators who had the big budget, and I was at GVC pre-Entain, and had the big budget, were able to develop systems. And yes, it was for player protection. And player protection is what we're all trying to drive. But also because they realized the difference between a lifetime player value and a sustainable lifetime player value. And what today I'm going to try and do very quickly is explain the difference between lifetime player value and sustainable lifetime player value. And then at the end of it, I'll actually tell you from our experience how much more money you can make. So having said that, a very brief introduction. I'm Paul Foster. I was 11 years in the industry, from party gaming and bwin all the way through to GVC. I left to found a company called Crucial Compliance that builds player protection software solution. And we are actually a 360 degrees platform that basically does everything that you require in the Royal Decree. And it's also open source, so you can put the Mindway AI algorithm through, or anybody else's algorithm, or your own algorithms. And you can put them up against ours. So let's start at the beginning. As Rasmus rightly said, the difference between a good algorithm and a very good algorithm is the difference between profit and loss in your business. The average algorithm, when it's first created for RG, is less than 50% accurate, which means you might as well be blindfolded and decide whether they are a problem gambler or not without even looking at them, and you would be more accurate. Even my own team, and we've got 37 algorithms, their first cut is less than 50%. What then happens is you have to train that algorithm, and you have to optimize it. And it takes about 12 weeks to turn a basic algorithm into a trained algorithm in the RG and AML player protection space for our company. Even then, we're at about 72% accuracy, which is no surprise when you saw the former Entain ones. So it was about 72% accuracy. What then happens is you put it live in data, whether it's in beta or live, you run real player protection against it, and that will get it from the 72% to the 80 plus. So, you know, what I would say to you is everybody rushing out there to get an algorithm or looking at a system, look at how experienced the company are developing it. Again, you can go internally, but your average algorithm will be less than 50%, and we see a lot of these because we put our system up against a lot of companies' own systems, and they are very ineffective. The other problem with algorithms is they need continuous monitoring, continuous training. As Raz just said, if you don't do that, the algorithms will move out of actually effectiveness. So again, if you're looking at a company, make sure they've got the capability to do it. So, right. We've got a lifetime player value, which somebody in BI sets for every new player who comes into your company. The problem with that in a regulated market is that it's affected by either RG or AML. And if we go back about 5-6 years in Europe, a lot of listed companies were having to give out profit warnings and saying, we are not going to hit our profits because of regulatory headwinds, because of RG, because of AML. The reason for that is that in those companies, they are still looking at lifetime player value. What they haven't recognized is that RG, safer gambling, AML, will have a massive impact on your players. And it is only if you take your lifetime player value and you deduct a percentage for your safer gambling, and then you deduct a percentage for AML, you will come up with a sustainable player value. But in order to have that, you have to have the right algorithms running over it for safer gambling and the right algorithms for AML. The more accurate they are, the more accurate your forecasting. So if you're in a company that believes in lifetime player value, challenge the company back. You must be operating now, because of the royal decree, on sustainable player value, or your figures and your profits will be millions out. However, the good news is, once you get the accuracy of the sustainable player value, you will increase the lifetime value of that player. And here's a few examples. So if you have a player, you bring them in, you very quickly have to assess them and put them into boxes of what type of player they are. Again, the royal decree now states, they've just given you the boxes. They've made it easy. You put them in that box, and each of those boxes needs an algorithm running behind it, or a large algorithm which takes it into account. You then have the algorithm running over it that will actually tell you the risk very quickly, within hours or days, of which player is who. Which of those boxes will they fit into? You know, we're very quick at being able to identify who's going to be a VIP, who's going to be a bonus abuser. Well, it's just as quick to go through the safer gambling algorithms and decide who's going to be a risky player, who's going to be a high value player. They're the same type of models, but from an RG perspective. So as soon as they come into your business, you put them in the correct bucket. So immediately then, your lifetime player value of each of those players has a different equation, depending on which bucket they're in. So you're immediately allowed to rejiggle your entire business very quickly into what is more realistic from a player value. You then have an idea of what that player will make or lose. You have an idea of how risky they will play. You then can immediately start to look at your marketing, your promotions, your bonusing. If you have a risky player, you don't have to wait, like the royal decree says, for 72 hours to start changing. The way you create sustainable player value is reacting as soon as possible. So when you see risky behavior, you put somebody in the box, and then you may choose to reduce marketing. You may choose to reduce bonusing, but you will definitely start to interact with that player by whatever means. You know, we've heard maybe emails work. People use WhatsApp. People use pop-ups. There are so many ways that CRM systems today can interact with your player. It's really important that your responsible gaming and player protection system uses all those CRM capabilities. And if you've got CRM capabilities outside, because you have a third-party system, your player protection system must link in. Because the quicker you interact with that player, the sooner you will bring them back from the danger zone into the safety zone. And the more accurate your sustainable player value becomes. If you then take into account the AML constraints that you're going to be under, especially around the 600 euros, especially about the spend, and then, you know, how we're going to implement it, I have no idea. But next year, when we get the cross-operator deposits, we will be able to put an algorithm over the top of that, or several, and monitor player behavior. And for the same thing you're doing with safer gambling, you can put an algorithm over the top of it, and all of a sudden, you then have the full sustainable player value, because it is actually predicting what is going to happen to that player. So player A comes in, you give them a lifetime player value of 2,500 euros. So normally, you would bonus them, you would market to them, you'd be happily sending them on their way in the hope of turning them into a VIP player. However, within days, you've run your safer gambling across and realize they're a risky player. So you immediately want to reduce that, stop wasting money on marketing, bonusing to that individual, so you save costs, and secondly, you change the player behavior. Because if you continue to do that, most likely you would have burnt that player out. You would have kept bonusing them and encouraging them to gamble until, unfortunately, they had literally blown themselves out, spent all their money, self-excluded, and left you. So immediately what you're trying to do is reduce that danger zone. You're trying to keep them in that fun zone and actually make sure that the peaks and troughs of play are not happening. Then you've now got a player who's playing in the safety zone from a safer gambling point of view, and all of a sudden you're fulfilling your requirements, the safer gambling requirements of the royal decree. That's great, tick box, you're not going to get fined either. Then you put your AML considerations over the top, and all of a sudden you have that sustainable player value. And it may be because you're doing AML checks, you find negative media. You know, you do your KY verification on your EDD and your risk assessment, and you find there's an issue with the player. It's not who you thought it was. So long before you actually get to the point of having to stop that player, because guess what? You normally did your risk assessment way down there. You're doing it much earlier. Again, you're saving your company money because you're not spending money on the costs associated with managing, bonusing, and just looking after that player. Because very early on, and this can be within the first week, you know that player is never going to hit those levels of lifetime player value. So here's the important thing. Those who've been using our system for more than 3 years, and we're not talking about the UK market here, we're talking about Czech Republic, Slovakia, Poland, Romania, UK, Croatia. Those are a few of the markets that have been running for over 3 years. The sustainable player value is worth 2.8 times lifetime player value because they play for longer without the peaks and troughs and because you don't turn them off. You're not turning them off for safer gambling and either forcing them to self-exclude themselves or you're actually turning them off. You're not closing them for AML because you turn them off a lot earlier or you're able to manage them into that journey. And that is quite phenomenal. Yes, it takes a lot longer. You have to change your business model. It is no longer the case that somebody comes in and within 3 months spends a lot of money and then leaves, or a VIP lasts 9 months. What you're trying to do is keep them on average for more than 3 years. So you're increasing the length of a player, you're increasing actually their trust in your brand, which means they'll spend more money with you, and overall, your business will benefit. There is a short-term hit. That first quarter, second quarter, when you start to do this, you will see a drop. Quarter 3, quarter 4, break even. By quarter 5, you're actually in profit on that player. So, yes, it's about player protection, but player protection done right will make you more money. So don't be afraid, and I know there's been a lot of pessimism today in this room about the Royal Decree. There is the technology and experience out there from companies like ourselves, Mindway, and several others who've been doing this a long time, 5, 6, 7 years. We've tested this all around the world. We've already built the models for here. They're in beta. We're testing them with real life people. So don't panic. It may look scary. You may be writing down the figures for this market. I'm already aware of people pulling out of this market, which is crazy, because they're already doing safer gambling elsewhere in the world. What's the difference? There isn't any. What's the difference is what is the specifics of the Royal Decree, and the fact is we need to change our algorithms. Sometimes they take 1 minute, with us it's slightly longer, but you just have to change them. You have to build them, and you have to be right. So the summary is, don't be afraid. Look around you, get the right people to support you. You will make more money because the player will feel safer. They will not burn out. They will not have the problems. You will not have the AML risk that you could have. And surely that is the best thing for the Spanish market today, that we actually create that sustainable player value. And so remember, if you're in a meeting and somebody talks about lifetime player value, that's wrong. And your CEOs, CFOs, CMOs, COOs, they all need to be talking about sustainable player value, because that is the difference between you running a good business or a great business. And on that point, I'll stop. I am actually 2 minutes early, but just in case there's any questions.
Paul, thank you. Thank you for being on time. Also, the economic question I asked to the ladies before was extensively answered in your speech. So thank you for that. Any questions to Paul? I think he brought some new angles to the table here. So, question here we have, Paul, could you mention a few markets in which you have managed to create sustainable player value?
Yes, so the key one is around length of time on site. Okay, so if somebody increases their length of time on site, you need to be interacting with them to understand. Second one is around deposits, but not deposit value, as Peter Marcus was talking about. It isn't necessarily about value, it's about the number of deposits you do in a session. So if somebody normally does 2 or 3 deposits in a single session, and they start moving to 5+ deposits in a section, that's a real sign that something is changing with that player. Because Then all of a sudden you'll see another marker come up called chasing losses. But what you see first is the increase in deposits. So before they start to chase their losses, you can actually interact with them in real time and stop them chasing their losses. So there are 3 key marks of harm. And remember, anybody who has ever read the study, and by the way, it is free and online, there was 172 markers talked about in the study, and I was part of it. Like I say, we built 37 of them, and they take a long time to build and monitor. So, there's a lot of markers out there. Those are the 3 key ones, I think, for this market that you need to have in your system.
Paul, apologies, and I think your answer was super interesting. It's my English pronunciation. Markets as in countries.
Yes.
Which countries have you been monitoring and seeing these economic effects?
Yes, so we've monitored the Czech Republic, Romania, Poland, and all of those, as well as the UK, as well as Malta, as well as Gibraltar. So we've covered probably 60 to 70% of the European market to get those figures.
Okay,
so thank you very much.
Figures. Paul, thank you very much.
Thank you very much.